Yep. So we'll begin at 8 o'clock sharp. I'll just give a brief introduction about the event and then you can take over. Sounds good?
Sure, yeah. Can I try presenting my screen just to make sure it works?
Yes, absolutely.
Just give me a sec. Are you able to see it?
Yes, your screen's visible.
Cool. Let me just shift to full screen once. Do you see it in full screen now?
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Great. So yep. Movin, can you just a second for some time unshare your screen? I'll share a PPT. Yep.
Sure.
Great. Yes. Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? If my voice is clear, please write yes in the chat if my voice is clear. Perfect. And you can see my screen as well. Great. Great. Perfect. So let's begin with another exciting session for India Product Week. Today we have our fourth session, right? And before moving with the fourth session, we'll just have a quick recap of the sessions we've had till now. So our first session was with Mr. Shailendranath, VP of Products at Spinny. Our second session was taken by Mr. Shravan Tikku, Principal PM at Byju's. Our third session was with Mr. Venkat Raman, ex-VP of Products at Bounce. And today we have a session with the Director of Product Management, Mr. Movin Jain. And moving forward, we have 3 more events lined up for you on tomorrow, Friday, then on Saturday, and then on Thursday, then on Friday, and then on Saturday, right? So moving ahead, we have today's session, which is innovation and creativity in product management, which is a very important topic in product management, right? So I'll not take much of your time and I will introduce today's speaker. So the speaker we have today has worked with products that we all use in our daily lives, right? So he has worked with Meesho, Ola, and right now he's the Director of Product Management at PhonePe. And this is not where his accomplishment stops. He was also co-founder of Gallery 5, which is at the moment the market leader in social media marketplace. So I welcome Mr. Movin Jain and I thank him for being here and sharing his wisdom, learning and experience with all of us. And I won't take you from the students anymore, Movin. It's all you and students now.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for the introduction and happy to be here. Hi, everyone, and really excited to talk to all of you. Great. Gaurav, shall I go ahead and share my screen?
Yes, absolutely, Movin.
Okay. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it is visible, Movin.
Great. Awesome. So today we are talking about innovation and creativity in product management. The reason I chose to talk about this topic is I thought there is already quite a lot of content on how to get into product management, how to do product management well, how to create a roadmap, how to manage stakeholders, how to do product management interviews, and so on. So I thought I'll take a slightly different approach and talk to all of you, and talk about something which, while it is always in the background when we are working on any technology, uh, either as a product manager or in any other role, but it is something that we don't often proactively think about or have a framework to discuss. So I tried putting a framework around it, and I hope it helps all of us in thinking about how to be a little more innovative in our work as a product manager or even in any other role. Uh, this I want it to be an interactive session. So I think after I'm done with each section, I will stop and hope that I can see some questions. So Gaurav, can we do Q&A through the Zoom chat, or can we also do live Q&A?
I'll be reading the questions in the chat, and the questions
Sure.
that are some questions that will help the entire student cohort to understand better. We will take up those questions and we will answer those questions. Sounds good?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's start. So why innovation and creativity? So the world is changing fast, and I'm sure all of us realize this. People are expecting more and more from technology every day, and all of us are part of this definition of people. We all, including myself and you all, expect much more from technology with every passing day. The technologies that we used 5 years back, we just would not like using them today. We just expect much more. We just expect much faster uh, phones, for example. We just expect apps that ask us less questions and just do the job much better, right? So people are expecting much more from technology every day. That's just become a habit, and it's that pace of change is accelerating even further. There is also an increased investment in technology, and it is a globally agreed sort of consensus that the role of technology in the entire economy is going to keep on increasing very rapidly. And hence, investors are also putting in a lot of money into technology, because of which the resource constraints that existed, say, 10 or 20 years back, don't exist today. And that is leading to very high competition in any kind of technology that you're building, and which means that just thinking incrementally, which might have worked 20 years back, doesn't work anymore. So you have to bring in a much higher level of innovation. Um, New paradigm shifting technologies are also emerging. Blockchain and Web3 are examples of that. Um, because of these technologies, the way certain things are done might completely get transformed. And for that reason, it is important to be aware of what's happening in these new technologies and where all these new technologies can be applied. And whichever field you're working in, what's going to be the impact of the arrival of these new paradigm shifting technologies, and whether the paradigms within your area are also going to change completely because of this, right? And the answer may be yes, the answer may be no, but asking that question is super important. Ignorance is definitely not something which is going to help in this day and age. Um, the other thing is, I think over the last year and a half, obviously the pandemic, which has had a lot of unfortunate outcomes, has also had some positive outcomes for the world of technology. It has brought us closer, and it has made technology much more acceptable to humans. I mean, just the fact that so many of us are keen to attend this conference virtually probably would not have been true a couple of years back. So I think a lot of our habits have changed because of the pandemic, and that has again led to higher acceptability of technology and much faster innovation. Things that are happening in technology today are things that we could not imagine a year and a half back, right? And for that reason, again, it's important to think very differently and think very innovatively rather than thinking just incrementally. So I want to just set a base for us to sort of think about what is innovation before we proceed further. Um, so, so from what I could find, product innovation is defined as the development and market introduction of a new, redesigned, or substantially improved good or service. So, as I was reflecting on this definition, there were a few things that I could find. Plus, from whatever I think about innovation, I also added a few more. I think what's important while defining innovation is that it has to be anything for us to call anything an innovation. It has to be significantly better than the status quo. It has to solve a real and new customer problem, or it has to solve an existing problem in a much better way. What do we mean by solving a new customer problem? It means either a problem that just uh, started occurring. For example, so many people working from home and not being able to connect with each other seamlessly is a problem that just started occurring a year and a half back when there were worldwide lockdowns, right? So that's a new customer problem. And uh, it could also be a problem that always existed, but people did not realize. And so you're now trying to create a technology that actually makes people realize that problem and solve it. Right. And or it could also be solving an existing problem in a much, much better way. So the emphasis here is that whatever innovation it has to be either solving a new and significant problem, or it has to be solving an existing problem in a significantly better way. Uh, and while the boundaries, I'm not getting into the specific boundaries, those could be different for each domain. But I think the emphasis is that um, doing something very small or a very small improvement in some area is not necessarily innovation. The next thing is innovation is not just about thinking about the idea and letting people know that, what if we could do this, or letting your team know about an idea, right? That's not called innovation. That is just ideation. Innovation actually includes the implementation of that idea, which means you build it, you launch it, and also includes the acceptance or adoption of that idea. So once the market actually responds positively and you see a huge growth in adoption. Of course, the exact benchmarks here could depend on the use case and the domain you are in, the kind of customers you are serving, and so on. But significant acceptance or adoption is key. Without that, it cannot be called innovation. Also, in my opinion, it also has to be a viable business model. If it is not, then that innovation is short-lived, and hence it's kind of tricky to call it innovation. It's not going to stay for a very long time, and hence whatever benefits it's bringing or whatever problems it's solving for the user or the customer, it is not going to be able to continue to solve those for a long time. It also needs to be sustainable. So I'm going to, in the next slide, focus particularly on fintech because that's a domain that I'm working in right now, and also a domain that I really like. I think, particularly when it comes to fintech, sustainability most importantly means whatever innovation you come up with is within the legal domain and it is compliant with the laws and regulations of that particular domain, that country, or that place. um, and it could also mean things like it's environment friendly and so on, but these are all things that could change from one domain to another. In the fintech domain, the legal and compliant aspect become really important when it comes to sustainability. So this is how I define innovation. Any questions so far?
Yes, we have a question moving. So it's like the question is from Suvajit, and the Suvajit is asking, IT is
Yeah,
like a supporting function. Yep.
I'll just read that question. So
Yes.
IT is like a supporting function to areas like manufacturing or engineering domains. So in that case, how can a product manager working on IT products excel in innovation? As the turnaround time for any product execution is not a long term, is there really a possibility of doing innovation in those core sectors? So I think, Suvajit, if I were to summarize the question, you are saying that if you're working in a IT function that's supporting things like manufacturing or engineering, um, how can you be innovative? And um, the particular sort of bottleneck that you see to innovation is that the turnaround times are tight and there is not too much space to think differently or think long term. I think good question. In my opinion, it's uh, it's useful to separate out the day to day from the slightly medium to long term thinking. And in day to day, as what you described, there could be deadlines, there could be tight turnaround times, and so on. It might get difficult to innovate. But as you do multiple such projects over a slightly longer horizon of, say, a year or a couple of years or 5 years, uh, you learn. Um, for example, I'll take one example of, say, IT companies that support manufacturing, right? So the manufacturing world itself is changing. And if you're working in an IT company that supports manufacturing, then understanding how the needs of manufacturers are changing and uh, what new solutions they might need, and how your solutions don't exactly fulfill those gaps could be innovation, could lead to innovation. Now, whether that innovation can be applied within the job that you currently are in or not, I think depends on a lot of factors, including what are the constraints, what kind of team it is, and what kind of a customer is it? Is the customer willing to accept a slightly different solution? And also, are you willing to, um, I mean, take a approach where you spend some time on innovating something, and then are you able to uh, cross utilize that innovation for other customers rather than just spending time on one customer? So I think I'll not get into the specifics of that particular vertical or use case, but it is definitely possible over a slightly longer horizon to innovate even in this scenario. Whether that innovation happens at every level in the company and whether it happens in that same company, or for example, somebody could learn from this experience and 3 years later could start their own company or move to a different company where they could apply their learnings. I think all of that still comes under the uh, ambit of innovation.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, Movin.
I think let's take one more question and then we'll move on.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's take Kavita's question. Legal and compliance can sometimes inhibit a company from innovating completely. How do we overcome that? Because whenever we come up with something innovative, the compliance team just doesn't allow us to do it. And it is frustrating because we know that it's good for the consumers. So, again, great question, Kavita. And I think especially relevant because I was going to speak about fintech in the next slide. So here's what my experience has been in the last 1 year that I have spent in fintech. And I started my career also with financial services, not fintech, but I started my career with an investment bank and worked there for 2 years, where we regularly worked closely with the compliance and the legal teams. Um, and so there was, I think, the nature of what you've described in terms of constraints from, compliance point of view applied there as well. So I think in both places, my experience has been that um, obviously compliance is a very important role in financial services or in fintech and even in some other domains. and their responsibility is to de-risk the company and the business from any kind of legal risk or being seen by regulators as someone who's trying to do something that will put customers at risk or will put the economy at risk or will lead to, say, something like money laundering and so on. And so there's a reason for each of the frameworks or rules that exists within compliance. But then if you talk about, I mean, ultimately a particular company's compliance team is, whatever they say or whatever internal constraints they apply are ultimately coming from some ground principles or rules that are set by the regulator or are set by the leadership of the company. I think wherever I've been stuck with any of those, rules where I think that I disagree with the, my colleagues in compliance, what I have typically done is gone back to those fundamental principles, either those underlying laws. For example, in my current job, it would be RBI and other SEBI and other regulators that would have created those laws. So reading those laws and interpreting them myself, rather than just depending on the interpretation of those specialist teams. And then discussing with them, here is my interpretation. Why do you think otherwise? And then in most cases, there is something that I'm missing and I'm able to get the answer. In some cases, there is something that I'm able to propose which they may not have thought of. And in some cases, that leads to even further discussion because there are some points where none of us has a very, very strong opinion, and hence we need to get some more experts into the discussion, or we need to, get somebody else within the company who can help us think through that situation. So, and I'm not saying that this is a recipe for solving your problem 100% of the time, but I think directionally, at least, what has worked for me is going back to basics and the fundamentals that lead to the constraints that are being, imposed by the compliance team. Okay. Thanks a lot for those questions. We'll come back to some more in a few more minutes. So let's proceed with the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to give some examples of innovation in fintech. Fintech is obviously a popular area in which a lot of startups are operating right now, globally as well as in India. There is a lot of investor money, and there are a lot of open available jobs for product managers, for software engineers, and even for many other types of roles in India as well as globally. So definitely something that I'm sure you've used and also thought about from a career perspective. So wanted to highlight a few examples of innovation. Obviously, these are not exhaustive, and also these are just things that came to my mind as I was thinking about it. It's a mix of some recent ones and some very fundamental historic ones that I could think of. So let's start with the Cred, which made it cool to pay credit card bills on time. Typically, paying back to somebody who's given you money is never a interesting or exciting thing, right? It's something which needs to be done because there are bad consequences otherwise. But it's not something that you look forward to. I mean, you're never excited about it, right? So Cred added excitement to paying back your credit card bills on time and improving your credit score, and they just created this whole thinking in the mind of their users that if you do this good action, then you become a good person, and then you get good things from Cred, right? And I think that's obviously they would have done this for their bigger business objective. But I think just making us all think like this is in itself an innovation in fintech. which at least before cred, that's not how I used to think. Doesn't mean that we were not paying our credit card bills on time. Probably most of us were, but just the excitement or the happiness attached to it did not exist earlier. Um, the entire UPI ecosystem, apps like PhonePe, Google Pay, Paytm, which are the leading three apps within the UPI ecosystem, and obviously NPCI, which created UPI, um, collectively brought instant real-time digital payments from bank account to India. If you spend a few weeks in the US or Europe, you will find that it's very, very hard to do something like this there. If you go to a shop and you're just carrying your cell phone and you're not carrying cash or your wallet, right? It's just very hard to make a payment because nothing like UPI exists there. So sometimes we just take this for granted, being in India, but it's actually a really amazing thing that has happened in India. The adoption of UPI and for the right reasons is obviously now growing exponentially. But the entire world is looking at us and trying to emulate what we've been able to achieve in UPI. Right? So it's a big innovation. Um, so I work with PhonePe, so obviously there's a disclaimer there, but I am quite excited about the fact that PhonePe recently ran an ad campaign where they promised no phone calls for insurance buyers. Typically, if you shop for insurance on any of the online insurance websites, then you're likely to get a lot of pestering phone calls. At least I personally hate those phone calls, and it's just very disturbing to get those phone calls when I'm actually trying to buy insurance on the website. And I think personally very excited about it. Obviously, there's not much that I know yet in terms of market response. This is a very recent thing, but at least it's a very bold thing to be able to declare that PhonePe would not be able to not be making any phone calls to insurance buyers, because obviously there is a reason why everyone makes phone calls, right? Because they are important to be able to convert your visitors into customers. Whereas PhonePe has taken the call that they will live without it and yet be able to run a successful insurance business. So I think it needs a lot of guts and is definitely an innovation. Obviously, over time, as the market responds, if it responds positively, this will be something that other players might also start learning from and becomes a movement. Then the next example is a more historic one. Visa and Mastercard created the two largest. I'm sure there are others before Visa and Mastercard and after, but these are the two largest global interbank payment networks. What this means is that you might hold a credit card from ICICI Bank. You go to a shop, let's say Reliance Digital, where the shop actually doesn't have any account with ICICI Bank, and they have a POS machine, point of sale machine, which is given by, say, Axis Bank, right? But you are still able to swipe your ICICI credit card into that machine. The reason is that there is a network which is connecting Axis Bank and ICICI Bank. That network could be Visa or Mastercard, or any of the other card networks. But these are two companies that actually, innovated and created these large global interbank networks, because of which your card has acceptance at all of the, merchants or outlets where this network is present. Then recently and globally, you might have heard of the buy now, pay later, or BNPL phenomenon. Affirm and Klarna, and there are a host of other companies, but these are two that were top of my mind, have created great products in the checkout credit space or buy now, pay later space, which has basically made customers think in a very, very different way about buying products, that you don't need to pay when you're buying it and you can pay later, right? In India also, there are quite a few startups that are working on this. There are quite a few recent startups as well as companies that have existed for the last few years also who have now started growing very fast because this is just a trend that is catching on globally. But I think being able to introduce this concept and make customers think in this way and help merchants and brands be able to provide this kind of a seamless functionality to customers is definitely an innovation. I think I'll again stop for questions. There's only one slide after this. So let's take another couple of questions. I'm just reading through the list of questions. I'll just pick one. Okay, so Sandeep has asked, we normally talk that a product should solve a customer pain point or problem. So in case of e-payment app, Paytm started earlier and brought in a digital payment revolution. So for PhonePe or any other digital payment apps, what is the problem statement as the basic problem is already solved by early players? Great question. I think the I'll sort of answer this more generically. Don't want to get specific about PhonePe and Paytm. I think when you are solving a problem that's already being solved by an incumbent, um, the only time when it can be called an innovation is when there are already, when you either solve it in a very different way, which leads to a much better experience, and hence leads to much faster adoption, or uh, you're you still solve it in the same way, but you're able to somehow solve distribution much better, right? So I think in this case, what has happened is that there were wallets, and Paytm was not the only player, but there was the concept of wallets, which where you had to load money and then you had to spend from that wallet. When UPI came in, it suddenly changed that concept, and you could just spend money from your bank account and didn't have to preload a wallet, which became an innovation in itself, right? And apps like Google Pay and PhonePe essentially took that concept to the customers, and it became hugely popular and is even today growing exponentially. So, in my opinion, that was a much better solution than what existed earlier, which is why uh, it I would call it a, big innovation. I think if it was only about a very similar solution to what already existed, and just multiple companies doing it, then probably it would not necessarily be innovation. And I think that kind of also ties in with what I mentioned earlier about UPI. That I think instant real-time digital payments from bank account, where from bank account is also a key part of it, um, is something that did not exist. I mean, wallets exist in a lot of other countries, including in Southeast Asia, and Europe and so on also. But the adoption that is seen there is not that high because people like us are still comfortable using wallets, but a lot of people don't want to preload wallets and want to use their bank accounts. So that's something that UPI has solved, which wasn't solved earlier. Okay. Um, how difficult is it to, so Shine has asked this question, how difficult is it to innovate or create something, some new product or idea in the fintech space, since almost all companies have the same workflow or design? Okay, so I think I disagree with this. I think that there are a lot of diverse ideas and spaces within fintech. You're probably thinking about one particular vertical within fintech, maybe payments, and thinking that each of the payments apps looks similar. Even that I would disagree, but there at least you wouldn't be completely wrong in the sense that some of the features are common. I think uh, the let me talk about different things that are happening in fintech, right? There is payments, there is investing. So, for example, Zerodha and PhonePe have nothing in common, right? Um, in Zerodha, through Zerodha, you can invest in stocks. You can buy and sell stocks or futures and options, but in PhonePe you can't. Um, and in PhonePe you can pay your bills, but in Zerodha you can't, right? So it's a very very different use case. The type of customers who use those apps are also very different, and accordingly the interfaces and so on are also very different. Um, there are quite a few other use cases also within fintech. For example, lending. Within lending, also there are different things. For example, lending for businesses versus lending for consumers. Cred is a completely different type of use case which did not exist before, and so on. So I think there are quite a few branches of fintech, and it's each of them probably more exciting than the other. But I think within one of those branches, of course, there could be multiple players who might have common features with each other. And I think talking about the first part of your question, how difficult is it to innovate or create something new in fintech? I do think that it's completely possible. Uh, the way we manage money today, I think, is uh, still, I mean, for example, I spend at least a couple of days every year doing my taxes. And I also think a lot about investment and so on. It's a sort of a thing that gives us all quite a bit of stress and so on, right? These are just examples that are top of my mind for myself as a customer. But the way payments has been solved so seamlessly, I think there is definitely opportunity for us to solve a lot of other things in fintech that seamlessly. And it hasn't been done yet. Even globally, I don't think it has been. In fact, India is probably ahead on the world map in most of the sections of fintech. Okay, let's proceed with the last section of my presentation, and then we'll take some more questions. So, how to innovate? So, I wanted to cover this part because I wanted us to have some sort of takeaways in terms of, okay, this is all good. Innovation, obviously, nothing bad about it. It's great to be innovative, but is there some practical way of implementing it or being more innovative? So, here are some simple things that I've found from my experience which just help in being more innovative. Uh, so the first thing is listen to the customer. This sounds very cliched because obviously as a product manager, this is one of the key things that you need to do. But I think there are companies that do this to varying extents, and I've seen that a lot of success in getting your products successful or getting your products adopted depends a lot on to what degree are you able to listen to the customer and understand their problems. So with each of the companies that I've worked at, I've seen that the extent to which we understand the customer directly determines how successfully the company can build relevant products. Uh, so uh, how to listen to the customer obviously depends on who your customers are. If your customers are uh, consumers, but as in the case of say Ola or PhonePe, people like us, right? In that case, just directly talking to them is helpful. But one pitfall to take care of there is don't get biased by just your own network or people sitting around you, because they might be just one type of customer, maybe of a certain income group, maybe of a certain background or a certain education, certain ethnicity, and so on. uh, Talk to different types of customers, even those who may or may not necessarily belong to your network, and hence it might be difficult for you to access them. But that's one of your jobs as a PM to reach out to different types of customers and talk to them and understand their problems. If your customers are businesses, then it's important to know who within that business is your customer, or who is it that you need to talk to. Do you need to talk to the CEO? Do you need to talk to the uh, you know the uh, the CA in the company? Do you need to talk to the IT team in the company? Do you need to talk to the HR team, and so on, right? Um, and then I think there also segmentation and being able to reach out to customers who are not just easily accessible to you, but also other types of customers is important. The second thing that I think I'm always really trying to uh, drill a lot on is focus on the problem and marry the problem, not the solution. What do I mean by this? As a product manager, it's important to be very, very clear about the problem statement. Oftentimes, what happens is, especially when you're starting your career or you're a beginner, early sort of a entry level product manager, or in the first few years of your career, you are given certain projects to work on, um, and you're just given some deadlines or given some expectations that you need to turn this around in this much time. And obviously, things are always high priority, and we're always running out of time. There are always delays. We don't have enough people to work on things, and so on. So, and there is always a hurry to just accept whatever you are given, whatever solution you are given, and just implement it, right? But that's a very, very small part of the job of a product manager. Uh, it is very important to first understand what the problem is, why that problem exists, who is having that problem, why do we need to solve that problem, and then exactly understand the details of the problem statement. Once you're very, very comfortable that you know the problem, you've discussed that problem with your team, I think majority of the job is done. Coming up with the solution and implementing the solution is less than half of the job, right? But I think uh, most product managers early in their career do not focus enough on discovering the problem or thinking enough about the problem. And that's something that I always like to emphasize a lot on, because the moment you start spending time on finding the right problem to solve and understanding the problem deeply, I think finding the solution for it is becomes a very small challenge. That's something which typically, as long as you have a good team around you, is not going to be a bottleneck. But if you pick the wrong problem, or if you did not understand the problem correctly, then there's very less chance of coming up with the right solution. Uh, the other thing is, I think how innovative you want to be might also depend on constraints. Somebody mentioned compliance, somebody mentioned tight deadlines, and so on, right? So there can always be versions of your product. You may want to launch something quick and dirty just to get into the market, or maybe because there is some deadline or some pressure to launch early. So the first version might not be that innovative, but it's still important to differentiate the problem statement from the solution, so that you know that solution number one is just the first version. The problem statement is actually something else, and solution one is only going to solve it to some small extent. Once you've launched that, and now there is no time pressure, you can come back to the problem statement and again think from scratch, and now start thinking about what the sort of real solution should be. And that's when you can start thinking about innovation. Um, Next, iterate based on market and stakeholder response. So once you've actually launched your solution, uh, you will obviously start getting market response. Whether people are adopting or not adopting is one type of response. If they are adopting, then exactly how are they using the product? What feedback are they giving? You can have success metrics. You can have direct feedback from customers. You can survey your customers. Um, and along with customers, in case of particularly fintech, stakeholders like regulators, your internal compliance team, and so on also matter. So iterate based on response from your customers as well as your stakeholders, because this is your opportunity to refine the solution and also to correct your understanding of the problem statement, because it may or may not be perfect just at the time when you launched. There could be things that were missing, or there could be an opportunity to just understand the problem statement better or come up with a better solution. So let the market and the stakeholders tell you that. So, and by let the market tell you that, what I mean is look at data, look at how customers are responding, what feedback they are giving, and be very receiving of that, and just listen to them again and again. Let your team exchange ideas and feedback. Typically, when you're a product manager, there would be a engineering team of multiple people. There could also be a design team, an operations team, and multiple other teams. I think giving them the exact solution that you've thought of and asking them to implement it is not a great idea. Just like, as I mentioned earlier, when you're given the exact solution and you just go and implement it, that you're not doing your job. Similarly, let them also participate in problem discovery as well as solution discovery. So tell them what you think the problem is, even involve them in listening to the customer, right? And then once as a team you agree on what the problem statement is, then start discussing ideas and solutions. Obviously, in each context, the amount of time you have, the kind of collaboration that happens between teams, and the kind of contribution each member of the team makes could vary. But it's very important to give your team the freedom to be able to contribute ideas and give them very open feedback on their ideas, so that you're not just bottlenecked by one person's ideas when it comes to innovation, because typically that is a very risky proposition. One person may or may not be able to think of the best solution, may or may not be even able to understand the problem statement. And if you're the product manager in the room and there are 5 engineers, do not assume that you are the one who's best at understanding the problem statement. That's not necessarily true. And if you're assuming it to be true, again, there's a risk of just becoming the bottleneck. So yeah, I think these are some practical thoughts that I had from my experience on how to be more innovative as a product manager. So I think that's all I wanted to share from my side. Let's now discuss a few more Q&A.
Yes. So thank you so much, Movin. It was really, really helpful, and it really made us understand the importance of creativity and innovation in product management, and not just in product management, but in the overall scope of your thinking, how you should approach problems. And I have a few questions that I wondered myself. So we talked
Sure.
about innovation and how important innovation actually is. But I cannot stop but wondering that what if we are blinded by innovation and we just keep on innovating, but we don't have anyone to use it? So we are just running behind innovation and we don't know where to stop innovating. So how do we manage to not blindly follow the passion of innovation and creativity, and to just keep creating without even realizing that what we are creating, people don't actually need that, or people don't actually have a use case for that?
Great question. I think I'll go back to a couple of things that I talked about. First is, I think innovation can only be called innovation if it solves a real new customer problem. And the way to find that out is acceptance and adoption in the market, right? So this definition, by the way, I had verbatim copied from some website as I was Googling. And here also it says the development and market introduction of a new blah blah. And so I think the market introduction part is key. And I would further add, it's not just introduction, it's actually acceptance and adoption. So if you've built something which nobody cares about, then it's not even innovation. You cannot even call it innovation. So it's kind of I mean, you can do it for passion, you can do it as a hobby, and nothing wrong with that, but it's definitely not innovation, right? So that is one thing. And if you're doing it as a hobby, obviously no problems. But if you're doing it as a product manager, then you're wasting the company's money, resources, people, and time in something that is your hobby, and that is not okay. So I think definitely as a product manager, this is not a great idea. But if you are doing this more as a personal project and just for fun, obviously nothing wrong with that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is marry the problem, not the solution, right? So what you said seems like, let's say I build something and I really love it. I am continuing to build better and better things, but those are better and better in my view. Maybe nobody else cares about it beyond my, let's say, group of 10 friends or family or, people who really admire me. So I think it's important there to differentiate the problem and the solution. What I've built is a solution. Do I really understand the problem? And the solution that I'm building, is it really solving that problem? Uh, it- Often, what you will find is that in such cases, probably there is no clear problem that you're trying to solve. And if that's the case, then again, as I said, for fun, it's completely okay. But if you're doing this in a professional setting where you're taking up a company's, investments to do this, then it's not okay. Uh, it's In that case, it's better to go back to the drawing board and understand what the problem is, and only then think about the solution. It's completely okay to let go of whatever solution you've built so far.
Understood.
Does that answer?
Understood. Yes, yes, absolutely, Movin. And one more question, and it was it was asked by the students as well. So we know that blockchain is on the brink. It's rising. Blockchain is rising, and we also had a question about compliance and legal earlier. So if blockchain establishes itself in India, so is there a chance that the purview of compliance and legal will decrease in some sort because blockchain is not necessarily controlled by anyone, or it does not needs any controlling of that sort? So what is your take on it?
Sure. I think very interesting question. I am not an expert by any means, and have only recently started reading about blockchain and Web3. I do think it's a very, very interesting time where a lot of technologies and a lot of use cases are being built using these fundamental building blocks. But to your question, I think uh, there is so the reason why regulation exists, the reason why all the rules, all the laws in financial services exist, are very fundamental to humanity. Uh, One of the concerns that uh, governments have always had is payment systems or financial services systems should not be used for terrorist financing, uh, or should not be used for money laundering, or should not be used for selling illegal stuff, right? Now, uh, the reason that governments care about this is obviously because their voters care about it. If their voters stopped caring about it at some point, then those governments would also stop caring about it. Obviously, there could be a few people who disagree with that, but I mean, the way governments work is that typically they would do what the majority wants. Now, uh, I think the way I think about it, these are just technologies which are going to enable decentralization, but the fundamental need for preventing bad things like terrorist financing are not going to go away. That need is not going to go away. So this technology will just have to evolve uh, to essentially implement those good things that were happening earlier in the traditional finance world. Uh, it'll just end up implementing those things in the new decentralized world somehow. I don't know what that implementation will be. I think I'm hoping that that will get figured out very soon. I think, especially given the pace at which things are moving in the blockchain and crypto and Web3 world, I think things will hopefully get figured out very soon. But I do think that without that getting figured out, it's just very difficult to make it mainstream. And I think that's what most of the regulators and the people leading this entire revolution are. That's one of the key puzzles for them. How do they make sure that they strike a balance between the fundamental needs of humanity, because of which traditional finance was working well, versus the need for decentralization and the need for things like speed and seamlessness, which these new technologies bring.
Understood. Absolutely, Movin. So I think we can take a couple of students' question now, and then we can move forward, wrap up with the session.
Sure. So I think I'll take Rohini's question. When you come up with an idea or upgrade to an existing product, how do you decide, or who decides technical feasibility of new implementation considering existing infrastructure and technical resources? So I think I will rephrase your question. I think what you're trying to ask is, when you come up with a new solution, or basically an improvement on an existing product, how to decide, or who should decide uh, the technical constraints, especially given that there might already be some infrastructure and some technology stack built. So I think don't have like a full framework for this, and probably don't have enough time to go into the full details. But at a very brief level, the way I think about this is, there are 2-3 parameters or 2-3 questions that one should ask oneself. Uh, if that um, new product or new implementation that we're doing is to solve some very short-term objective, right? Then I would probably not bother about building something new or from scratch, and would probably want to build something more incremental and save time, right? Whereas if it is something for a very long-term need, or maybe let's say a new business unit that we are incubating, and we have a very long 10-year strategic view that this business unit is going to, let's say, be one of the key strategic initiatives for this company. In that case, it's probably okay to completely do away with the existing technology and rewrite from scratch. Again, depends on the context. I mean, if you're trying to build let's say a business where it would need a team of 10 people to write code for 1 year, um, within a company that already has 5,000 engineers, right? Then it's probably a very small decision for that company, versus a company that has only 50 people. It's a very big decision for them, right? Within the scope that they exist in. So it also depends on how big the company is, how many people, and how much time and how resources they have, um, and how strategic that problem is. Then I think the third aspect will be a little more technical as to what are the pros and cons of uh, creating a new implementation versus incrementing on top of an existing implementation. So I think, obviously, as you can see, most of these will need a very, very detailed discussion and will need exact context of that particular company and that particular problem statement. And hence, I don't think I can comment further. But yeah, these are some directional sort of questions that I would worry about. Okay, I'll take Partha Sarthi's question next. We are aspirants from different streams. Currently, a prospect fresher gets into product company as assistant or associate product manager, then in 4 years, a PM. Likely how effective a 10 years of experience on different IT areas one can get into, how effectively a 10 years of experience on different IT areas one can get into PM stream. As the challenge is 10 plus years, the market fit position may be senior PM, though our target may not be uh, that level, but orgs may not consider someone with not having core hands-on. What is your suggestion on this? How can we be there? Okay, I think the question probably is trying to ask that uh, from aspirants of product management from different streams might need different number of years of work experience to get into product management, and also the level at which they enter product management might be different. So someone with who's uh, working in one particular stream might work for 4 years and then become a PM. A fresher starts as an APM, works for 4 years, becomes a PM. Someone from IT who has worked for 10 years might directly get into a PM position. Uh, I think, and the question you're trying to ask is, how can we? So probably you're somebody from the IT background, and you're trying to wonder how to get into product management. I think what I would suggest is, so with career changes, there is one mantra that I've discovered myself after making some mistakes. Whenever you change something, change only one thing at a time. And what do I mean by one thing at a time? Let's say in um, I'm in technology companies and working as a product manager, right? Versus I'm in a bank working as an ops manager, operations manager, right? Now, working in a bank as an operations manager to working in a technology company as a product manager means I'm changing at least two things. One is the domain, the industry that I'm working in, from banking to technology. The other is the function that I'm doing, from operations to product management. So it's better to take small steps where you change one thing at a time. So either you change only the industry in one career move, work there for 2, 3 years, and then you take the next step in the ladder, will change the next thing, right? Or you change your function first, which means within the company, the banking company where you're currently working, you move from operations manager to product manager or something in the technology domain, and then over time you change your industry. So essentially, if you want to make a career jump to something that seems very unapproachable, then try to break it down into slightly smaller steps. I think that's the only thing that I'm able to contribute to the question you asked. Uh, I think I probably need much more detailed context to be able to help further. Um, I think, yeah, we are slightly over time. Let's take one more question quickly and then we can wrap up. Gaurav, is that okay?
Yes, absolutely fine.
Okay. So, hi, I believe, so this is Manisha's question. Hi, I believe that when innovation can make us capable to reach at Mars at very low cost, why have developed countries spent big amount on it? This is also a great example of innovation when something already exists. Okay, I probably didn't understand the question. Let me move to a different one. Satya's question. During redesign, during redesigning the product, if 50% user feedback on product improvement is different from the rest 50% users, then as a product manager, how will we proceed? Great question. So I think there is one answer that comes to my mind here. But I'll try to generalize it and see, sort of give you a version that can be applied everywhere. The reason that, so I think what I would try to do here is try to go deeper into the reason why half of my customers differ from the other half. One possibility is that their needs are very different, right? If their needs are different, then I would probably try to understand why are their needs different. Are they very different type of people? That actually gives me a great opportunity to understand uh, who are the type of customers for whom my product currently works, right? So if customers of type A really love my product and customers of type B don't care, then probably I've built something that is great for type A customers. Now, if that is deliberate, then great, I'm doing well, right? Then probably I should just start targeting more customers of type A and stop, spending any marketing resources on customers of type B, and just start growing, my customer base within type A. But if that was not my intention, and if type A was never my target segment, in that case, I should completely revisit how I've approached the problem statement and try to understand what the problem statement really is. If segment B is actually my target segment, then I should first try to understand what is the problem statement that segment B has. Maybe I misunderstood the problem. And so I should talk to more and more customers of segment B, avoid talking to more and more customers of segment A because that's not the segment I'm targeting. So essentially, I think the generic framework to think about this is maybe those two types of customers are different. So think in segments and choose which segment you want to go after. Eventually, you may want to serve multiple customer segments, but at least when you're building a new product, it's helpful to think one customer segment at a time and not try to solve for everyone together because then you may end up solving for no one. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the session, Gaurav.
Yes. I'll take just 5 more minutes of you moving, and we'll
Sure.
wrap up the session. Can you quickly unshare your screen? I'll have to share something.
Sure.
So first of all, thank you so much, Movin, for coming at Insaid and speaking at India Product Week. It was really insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your learnings, and your experience all over these years. And I would want everyone in the chat to thank Movin for coming here and sharing his wisdom with us, right? And with this, I request each and every one of you to go onto LinkedIn. You know where you have to go. You have to go on Insaid and you have to convey your thanks to Movin for coming here at India Product Week and giving us all of this information, this experience, this learning. And as a token of gratitude, Movin, from Insaid and from all our students, please accept this token of appreciation. And thank you so much for being here. It was really lovely having you, Movin. And the chat's all yours. I would request you to have a look at the chat. It's all flowing with thank yous, and they had a wonderful session, Movin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure. All the best.